My name is Skylar Weston, and at 34, I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. Then my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. You weren't invited to dinner. Your brother's girlfriend doesn't like you. I stared at those words, my stomach turning to ice. The same parents whose business I had rescued with a $330,000 investment were now excluding me because of someone who'd only been in our lives for 8 months. I replied with just one word. Okay. Then I opened my laptop and began canceling payments, deleting every single receipt, 101 of them. But before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries with family. Now, let me take you back to where it all began, how my family's betrayal slowly unfolded. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, the older of 2 children. My parents, Harrison and Diane Weston, worked tirelessly to provide for us. Money was always tight. Dad moved between various management jobs, while Mom waited tables at a local Italian restaurant. Despite the financial pressure, our home was filled with love and laughter. My younger brother Jace and I were inseparable. For years younger than me, he was my shadow, following me around, always looking up to me. I helped him with his homework, taught him how to ride a bike, and defended him when neighborhood kids were unkind. We shared inside jokes and secret languages that drove our parents crazy. I truly believed nothing could ever come between us. Our parents, while loving, had very different expectations for the two of us. For me, it was academic excellence and complete independence. For Jace, they were more relaxed, often excusing things with, "That's just how boys are." Still, I never felt resentment. I loved being the responsible older sister and took pride in my achievements. School came easily to me. I graduated as valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to Northeastern University's business program. My parents were bursting with pride at graduation. Dad called it the proudest day of his life. Mom cried happy tears and told me, "You're going places, Skylar." College changed everything. I thrived in the high-pressure environment, interning at top consulting firms while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. By graduation, I had multiple job offers and accepted a position at a prestigious consulting firm in Boston. Starting salary, $90,000, more than my parents had ever earned combined. By 28, I had climbed the corporate ladder and become the youngest senior consultant in my firm's history. Clients specifically requested me, impressed by my strategic thinking and problem-solving skills. My boss often said, "Skylar has the Midas touch. Everything she handles turns to gold." At 30, I took the biggest leap of my life. I left my secure position to start my own consulting business. Everyone thought I was making a mistake. Everyone, except my family. "You've always been a leader, not a follower," Dad told me. Mom added, "If anyone can do it, it's you." And they were right. The risk paid off beyond anything I'd imagined. Within 18 months, I had Fortune 500 companies on my client list. I hired a team of consultants and moved into a sleek office in downtown Boston. With my success came financial freedom. I bought a beautiful condo overlooking the Charles River, and that Christmas, I surprised my parents by paying off their mortgage. The look on their faces when I handed them the paperwork is something I'll never forget. Around that time, they shared a dream they'd long kept close. They wanted to open their own restaurant. After decades of working for others, they were ready for something of their own. Mom described it as a small Italian place, warm and welcoming, built on my grandmother's recipes. Dad had even found a location, a struggling restaurant in our old neighborhood that was up for sale. The timing, however, was terrible. The economy was unstable, and restaurants were failing at alarming rates. Their savings would barely cover half the purchase price, let alone the renovation and operating costs. Banks had already rejected their loan applications twice. "We know it's a long shot," Dad said, disappointment heavy in his voice. "We'll just keep saving and try again in a few years." That night, I ran the numbers. With my business thriving, I could afford to help, without endangering my own finances. I drew up a business plan, estimating costs, potential revenue, and a realistic return on investment. The next morning, I called them. "I want to invest in the restaurant," I said. "Not just to help, but because I believe in you both. I want to be part of making this dream come true." There were tears, protests, and finally, acceptance. "We'll pay you back every penny," Mom promised. Dad added, "This will be a true family business, decisions made together." Jace was thrilled. Having recently graduated with a general business degree, he'd been struggling to find his direction. "This is perfect timing," he said. "I can help manage the place." Over the next 6 months, I invested $330,000 into what would become Weston's, not all at once, but through a carefully structured 3-year financial plan. The initial $200,000 covered the purchase of the failing restaurant. The remaining $130,000 was allocated to renovations, equipment, marketing, and operating expenses, just enough to keep the business afloat until it became self-sustaining. My attorney strongly advised putting everything in writing, creating a formal business agreement. But when I brought it up to my parents, they looked hurt. "We're family, Skylar," Dad said, his voice tight. "Do you really think we need legal papers between us?" Mom added, "Your grandmother would roll over in her grave if she knew we were signing contracts with our own daughter." Against my better judgment, I gave in. We drafted a simple agreement outlining my 30% ownership and profit-sharing arrangement, but it was never signed. It remained tucked away in the back of my desk drawer. "Family trust will be enough," I told myself. With the restaurant secured, I poured my energy and expertise into transforming the space. I hired an award-winning local designer to create a warm, inviting atmosphere that honored traditional Italian aesthetics while maintaining a modern, Instagram-worthy appeal. The renovation cost $90,000, $30,000 over budget, but the results were worth every penny. The kitchen received a complete overhaul, featuring $120,000 in state-of-the-art equipment. "This is better than what they have at the Ritz," Dad whispered during installation, eyes wide with disbelief. I reminded him that quality tools were essential for efficiency and excellence, values that would define Weston's. Marketing was my specialty. I invested $70,000 in a comprehensive campaign. I developed a compelling brand story centered around authentic family recipes passed down through generations. Our grand opening drew local food critics and social media influencers. I designed seasonal menus tailored to photograph beautifully for online promotion and trained staff to encourage sharing with a custom hashtag. The remaining $50,000 served as operating capital, cushioning us through inevitable slow periods and surprise expenses. I established streamlined accounting systems to track every single dollar. Each expense had a corresponding receipt in my digital archive, eventually totaling 101 separate transactions. We held weekly management meetings every Monday morning. I'd arrive with data analysis, marketing updates, and strategic recommendations. At first, my parents welcomed the structure, implementing my suggestions and celebrating the results. In Weston's first year, revenue increased by 40%, a nearly unheard-of figure for a new restaurant. Jace took on the title of floor manager, drawing a modest but fair salary of $55,000 a year. I created training manuals and support systems to help him thrive, spending countless weekends teaching him inventory management, staff scheduling, and customer service best practices. "You're making this so easy for me," he admitted one night after closing. "I don't know what we'd do without you." His gratitude seemed genuine, though his involvement was limited considering his title. He frequently missed Monday meetings, often blaming oversleeping or other vague excuses our parents readily accepted. I handled staffing, hiring key team members, including Chef Mateo Rivera, whose talent elevated our family's recipes to a gourmet level. I negotiated favorable supplier contracts that reduced food costs by 15% without compromising quality. From our reservation system to customer feedback protocols, every part of the business bore my professional imprint. Despite providing services worth hundreds of thousands in the consulting world, I never charged my family a fee. My reward was watching Weston's thrive and seeing the pride on my parents' faces as they welcomed guests. Local publications featured Weston's in Best of Boston lists. Securing a reservation became increasingly difficult. By the end of year 2, the restaurant was profitable enough for my parents to finally increase their personal draw. They took their first vacation in 15 years, a 2-week culinary tour of Italy. While they explored the old country, I ran the restaurant in their absence, working 16-hour days, while still maintaining my own consulting business. Throughout this time, I continued keeping meticulous records of every expense: equipment maintenance, bonus payouts, seasonal marketing pushes, special events, and more. Each receipt was digitally filed, a testament to my ongoing commitment to their dream. When they returned from Italy, Mom said softly, "You've given us more than money." Dad added, "You've given us dignity and purpose. This place wouldn't exist without you, Skylar." Their words touched me deeply, reinforcing my belief that mixing family and business could work when grounded in love and respect. How wrong I was. The first time I met Brielle Hartman was at a Sunday family dinner at Weston's, roughly 2.5 years after we opened. As usual, Jace arrived late, but this time with a petite blonde woman by his side. "Everyone, this is Brielle," he announced, his arm wrapped casually around her shoulders. "We've been seeing each other for a few weeks." Brielle was 29, stylishly dressed with a sense of curated, effortless elegance. She had an infectious laugh and the kind of confidence that lit up a room. "I've heard so much about all of you," she said warmly, extending her hand to me first. "Especially you, Skylar. Jace says you're the family genius." I liked her instantly. After years of Jace's short-lived flings, usually more interested in free meals than meaningful connection, Brielle felt like a breath of fresh air. She asked thoughtful questions about the restaurant's history and even complimented design touches I had personally chosen. Over dessert, she mentioned, "I actually have a background in hospitality management. I worked with the Fairmont Hotel Group for 3 years and managed a downtown bistro before switching to event planning." My parents were clearly charmed. Mom kept refilling her wine glass, giggling as she told embarrassing stories from Jace's childhood. Even Dad, usually guarded around Jace's girlfriends, gave her a full tour of the kitchen, introducing her to the staff as Jace's special lady. As we locked up that night, I turned to Jace and said, "She's impressive." "Yeah, she's different," he agreed, a softness in his tone I rarely saw. "I think she might be the one, Skylar." In the months that followed, Brielle became a familiar presence at family events. Casual visits evolved into regular attendance at our Monday business meetings. "Brielle has such great insights," Jace explained when I raised an eyebrow. "She understands the restaurant business." At first, I welcomed her input. She suggested seasonal cocktail specials that quickly became popular with younger patrons. Her idea for weekend brunch led to an 8% revenue increase. Thanks to her hospitality contacts, we booked several large corporate events. But around the 6-month mark, subtle shifts began creeping in. Despite my reservations, I relented. I presented data showing a noticeable decline in our dinner service efficiency and recommended adjusting staffing to address the issue. Before my parents could respond, Brielle interjected. "Actually," she said, "I think the problem is your reservation system. It's outdated. At my previous restaurant, we used a different platform that eliminated these issues entirely." Before I could explain that our system had been carefully chosen to suit our staff and operational needs, Dad was already nodding. "Brielle has a point, Skylar. Maybe we should look into this new system." Though I knew the issue was clearly staffing, not technology, I agreed to research the alternative. The following week, I presented updated findings. Brielle was absent, and my parents accepted my recommendation without hesitation. This pattern soon became familiar. When Brielle attended meetings, my professional assessments were questioned. When she wasn't there, my family valued my expertise, as they always had. Then one evening, I walked into the restaurant and immediately noticed a significant change to the dining room layout, one I hadn't been consulted on. The intimate four-top tables I'd carefully selected had been replaced by large, communal tables arranged in the center of the room. Brielle suggested this would create a more social atmosphere, Mom explained when I asked, "Isn't it lovely?" more like a true Italian family dining experience. What hadn't been considered, or at least not discussed with me, was that this new layout reduced our seating capacity by 12 covers per service. A notable revenue impact. Rather than immediately call it out, I decided to observe the results. Around the same time, Jace grew increasingly distant. My calls started going to voicemail. Our weekly sibling brunches, once a cherished tradition, were repeatedly canceled. When we did cross paths at the restaurant, he seemed guarded, his posture stiff and defensive, as if bracing for criticism. The exclusions began to pile up. I learned after the fact that my parents and Jace had toured potential locations for a second Weston's without ever mentioning it to me. I saw photos of family dinners I hadn't been invited to, posted on social media. Chef Matteo Rivera casually referenced a menu planning session I'd never heard about. "I thought you knew," he said, clearly confused. Brielle led the meeting. "She said you were too busy with your consulting work to attend." I had said no such thing. Meanwhile, I began noticing troubling trends in our financials. New vendor relationships had been formed without any discussion. Certain spending categories ballooned without explanation. A premium liquor order, nearly double our typical volume, appeared in the books, authorized by Brielle. At our next meeting, I raised these discrepancies. Jace immediately tensed. "Brielle's been helping me streamline operations," he said, voice sharp. "These are necessary improvements." "I'm sure they are," I replied calmly. "I'd just like to understand the strategy, since it impacts our bottom line." Mom stepped in quickly, offering an awkward laugh. "What Skylar means is that she likes to stay informed. We appreciate your help, of course, Brielle." The topic was changed before I could get any clear answers. In April, 3 scheduled business meetings were canceled, all by vague text messages from my mother citing scheduling conflicts. When we finally reconvened in May, Brielle presented a fully developed summer marketing plan, one that completely replaced the strategy one had created months prior. "We took the liberty of moving forward since you've been so busy," she said, with a tight smile. "Jace and I worked on this together." The plan was flashy, but fundamentally flawed. It focused on promotions likely to attract one-time guests rather than cultivating a loyal customer base. Worse, the projected costs exceeded our marketing budget by 40%, and there was no ROI analysis. I voiced my concerns professionally, offering specific, data-backed alternatives that could meet similar goals within budget. Jace's face turned red. "Just because it's not your idea doesn't mean it's wrong," he snapped. Brielle's actually worked in restaurants, not just consulted for corporate clients. The meeting ended awkwardly. My parents avoided eye contact as I packed up my notes. As I exited, I heard Brielle whisper to Jace, "She always has to be the smartest person in the room, doesn't she?" Despite mounting red flags, I held on to hope. "These are just growing pains," I told myself. Brielle is still adjusting to our family dynamic. I couldn't have been more wrong. By the 8th month of her relationship with Jace, Brielle's influence over my family had shifted from troubling to alarming. My parents, once eager for my input, now began every business conversation with, "Brielle thinks," or "Brielle suggested." During a routine inventory review, I noticed a troubling trend. We were overstocking high-end liquors that weren't selling quickly enough to justify their cost. When I raised the issue, Dad grew defensive. "Brielle explained these brands create a sense of luxury," he said. "She says customers notice, even if they don't order." "That might be true in upscale hotel bars," I replied, "but our data shows customers prefer our house-made limoncello and locally crafted options. We're tying up unnecessary capital." Mom sighed. "Skylar, sometimes business isn't just about spreadsheets and data. It's about atmosphere, about feeling. Brielle understands that intangible quality." The message was clear. My data-driven expertise was too cold, too clinical. Brielle, by contrast, offered a warmer vision. Never mind that my cold calculations had grown the business by 40% and established a stable, thriving brand. The following week, I discovered that my marketing budget had been reallocated, without my knowledge. The photographer I'd hired, whose work had significantly boosted our social media presence, had been canceled. In her place, Brielle hired a friend, an aspiring photographer with a thin portfolio, at a higher rate. When I asked for an explanation, all Jay said was, "I approved it." This, coming from the brother who once trusted my judgment over anyone else's. During a discussion about our winter menu, I proposed keeping our top 3 best-selling pasta dishes and rotating seasonal specials around them. Jay scoffed. "That's playing it safe." Brielle thinks we should revamp the entire menu every quarter to stay relevant, Jace said dismissively. I countered calmly. Complete menu overhauls confuse our regular customers and drive up food costs. Gradual evolution helps us stay fresh without losing our identity. "See, this is your problem," Jace replied, his tone condescending. "You're too rigid." Brielle says restaurants today need to be agile. The personal slights soon became more blatant. My parents celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a party at the restaurant. I found out the day after, when a staff member casually mentioned what a lovely event it had been. When I called my mom, her guilt was obvious. "We kept it small," she explained. "Just immediate family and a few close friends." "I'm not immediate family?" I asked, unable to mask the hurt. "Of course you are, honey. It's just," Brielle had already arranged everything. She only reserved the small private dining room. There wasn't really space. There wasn't space for me. At my parents' anniversary celebration, in the restaurant I had financed, the message couldn't have been clearer if it had been carved into the wall. 3 consecutive business meetings were simply skipped, no notice, no rescheduling. I would show up on Monday morning to an empty office, or worse, find Brielle sitting at my desk, offering a half-hearted, "Oh, were we meeting today? Everyone's out right now." Meanwhile, longtime customers began voicing concerns. Margot Sinclair, a loyal diner since our opening, pulled me aside one evening. "Something's changed, Skylar," she said gently. "The portions are smaller, the service is rushed, and last week they were out of your grandmother's tiramisu. They served some deconstructed version instead. It wasn't nearly as good." I thanked her and looked into it immediately. Both the smaller portions and the deconstructed desserts were Brielle's doing, cost-cutting and modernization efforts, implemented without any discussion in the meetings I'd been excluded from. Financial reviews also became increasingly difficult. Receipts began to go missing. Expense categories were merged in the accounting system, obscuring transparency. When I asked for access to the full financial records, Jace bristled. "We're not your employees," he said bitterly. "This is a family business, not your personal consulting project." The irony of that statement, considering my $330,000 investment and years of unpaid professional services, seemed completely lost on him. Then, in late April, I made a discovery that crossed every line. A credit application for a major expansion loan, $120,000, had been submitted in the restaurant's name. No one had informed me, despite my 30% ownership. When I confronted my father, he seemed genuinely confused. "I thought you knew." Brielle helped Jace with the paperwork. "They said it was time to grow the business. And my investment doesn't entitle me to have a say in that decision?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. "Of course it does, Skylar. There's just been some communication issues. Brielle says you're so busy with your clients, we shouldn't bother you with every little thing." "A $120,000 loan isn't a little thing, Dad." He patted my hand in that old, patronizing way that always grated. "Let's table this discussion for the family meeting on Sunday. Everyone will be there. We can clear the air." I agreed and began preparing a thorough presentation, addressing both operational concerns and the widening personal divide. On Sunday, I arrived at the restaurant at the agreed time. The lights were off. The doors were locked. No one was inside. My calls went unanswered. Hours later, I received a text from Jace. "Meeting canceled. Something came up." That evening, I learned what had come up on Instagram. Photos showed my parents, Jace, and Brielle at a local winery, laughing over lunch, touring the vineyard, taking part in a blending session. The final post from Brielle showed them all raising glasses, captioned, "Sunday fun day with my future in-laws. So blessed to be part of this amazing family." The anxiety that had been building in my chest for months finally solidified into something sharper, colder. This wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't adjustment. This was exclusion. Deliberate and systematic. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. I hoped that direct, honest conversation might heal the rift. I scheduled a private dinner with my parents, away from the restaurant, away from Brielle's influence. They agreed easily, even seeming relieved for the chance to speak openly. Over appetizers, I calmly outlined my concerns, both about the business and the family dynamic. I feel like I'm being pushed out of decisions I should be part of. And more painfully, I feel like I'm being pushed out of the family. Mom reached for my hand. "Oh, Skylar, that's not true. We love you so much. It's just..." She trailed off, exchanging a glance with Dad. "It's just what?" I prompted. Dad cleared his throat. "Brielle's brought some fresh ideas to the restaurant. And she makes Jace so happy. Sometimes your directness can come across as criticism." My directness saved the business, I reminded them. More than once. And I've been nothing but supportive of their relationship. I just expect professional courtesy and basic inclusion in my own family. "Of course," Mom said quickly. "We'll do better. Communication has been lacking. But we've got that big family dinner planned for Sunday. We'll talk more then." I left feeling a cautious optimism. Maybe Sunday would be a reset, an opportunity to re-establish boundaries and expectations. In the week leading up to the dinner, I made extra efforts to mend fences. I complimented Brielle's new dessert presentation when I stopped by the restaurant. I sent Jace research to support a marketing idea he'd mentioned. I dropped off Mom's favorite flowers, just because. Each gesture was met with warm smiles and quiet thanks. It gave me hope that Sunday might truly be a turning point. On Saturday afternoon, I texted my mother, "Looking forward to dinner tomorrow. Should I bring anything?" No response came. Until Sunday morning. A single message that would change everything. "You weren't invited to dinner. Your brother's girlfriend doesn't like you." I stared at my phone, certain I had misunderstood. This couldn't be real. I called immediately. Voicemail. I texted back. "Mom, what are you talking about? We discussed this dinner on Tuesday." Her reply came minutes later. "Brielle organized this dinner to announce their engagement. She doesn't want tension or negativity. Jace agrees, it's better if you're not there. Maybe next time." The room tilted. My brother was getting engaged, and I was explicitly uninvited because his fiancée didn't like me. As if reading my thoughts, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Jace. "Skylar, please don't make this difficult. Brielle feels uncomfortable around you, and this is her special day. You're always judging her and questioning her decisions. Just give us this one night without your criticism." Before I could process the betrayal, my father chimed in. "Skylar, we love you, but you need to respect Jace and Brielle's wishes. Family means supporting each other's happiness. We can celebrate with you another time." 3 messages. 3 separate choices. Each one reinforcing the same brutal truth. Brielle's comfort mattered more than my inclusion in my own family. I sank onto the couch, physically ill with the realization. The people I had loved most, the people whose dreams I had poured my time, money, and heart into, had decided I was expendable. In that sharp, quiet moment of clarity, I saw the past 8 months for what they truly were. A systematic campaign to diminish my role, my voice, and eventually my presence. Brielle didn't just want me excluded from decisions. She wanted me gone. And my family had agreed. The messages kept coming, each one twisting the knife. "Mom, please understand. We're trying to keep peace in the family. Dad, don't overreact, Skylar. It's just one dinner. Jace, you're making this about you again. This is Brielle's and my moment." With trembling hands, I opened my laptop and pulled up Weston's financial records. 3 years of my life. $330,000 of my own money. Hundreds of hours of unpaid professional services, all given freely to support a dream that wasn't mine, but theirs. A dream I had embraced out of nothing but love. And now, I was too unpleasant to have a seat at the table. I navigated to the folder containing every transaction: equipment purchases, renovation expenses, marketing costs, payroll assistance during slow seasons, 101 carefully documented receipts. Each one represented a moment I chose them, and they had just proven how little I meant. I opened my banking app and started canceling every recurring payment linked to Weston's, the monthly marketing retainer, the quarterly equipment maintenance plan, the reservation system subscription. One by one, I severed the financial lifelines that bound us together. My phone buzzed again, but I no longer looked. Instead, I dialed my attorney. "Elena, I need your help dissolving a business arrangement," I said as soon as she answered. "Your consulting firm?" she asked, alarmed.
No.
"My investment in Weston's. I need to formally withdraw and protect myself." Elena, who had advised a formal agreement from the very start, didn't say, "I told you so." She simply replied, "I'll draft the necessary paperwork immediately. In the meantime, back up all records and correspondence." After we ended the call, I returned to my files. One by one, I transferred the 101 receipts to a secure legal cloud folder. Then I deleted them from my personal system. Each deletion felt like cutting another thread from the illusion I'd been clinging to. The illusion that sacrifice could buy me a permanent place in my own family. The final file was the hardest, the original receipt for the restaurant purchase. I remembered the day we signed the papers. My parents' tears of joy. Jace's excitement. Dad calling it the beginning of the Weston family legacy. A legacy that, apparently, no longer had room for me. My finger hovered over the delete button when my phone rang.
Mom.
For a moment, hope surged. Maybe they had reconsidered. Maybe they finally saw the cruelty in what they had done. I answered. "Skylar, what have you done?" she demanded. No greeting. No apology. Just panic. "The reservation system says our account is deactivated. The marketing agency called. The auto payment failed." No mention of how they'd hurt me. Just alarm over the consequences. "I've terminated my investment in Weston's," I said, my voice steady despite the tears on my cheeks. "You made it clear I'm no longer part of the family. Or the business." It seemed appropriate. "You can't do that," she exclaimed. "We have operations depending on those systems." This is exactly the kind of vindictive behavior Brielle warned us about. There it was. Their narrative. I was the villain. Brielle, the victim. And my family had taken a side, not mine. "I'll be sending formal dissolution paperwork this week," I said, ignoring her accusations. "My attorney will be in touch about repayment terms." "Repayment? We can't possibly repay $300,000. You said it was an investment, not a loan." "It was an investment in a family business," I replied. "And since I'm no longer considered family, the terms have changed." I ended the call. Then I blocked all their numbers. Finally, I returned to my computer and deleted the last receipt. 3 years of sacrifice, erased with a single click. My response to the message that had started it all, the text uninviting me for my brother's engagement dinner, had been just one word. Okay. It wasn't agreement. It wasn't acceptance. It was acknowledgement that I finally, fully understood where I stood. Outside the family. Unwanted as an investor. Disposable as a daughter. Lesson learned. In the days that followed, what I now call the text, I entered a strange, productive calm. My attorney and I got to work. With Elena's guidance, I meticulously documented every aspect of my investment in Weston's. Though I had deleted the original receipts from my personal system, all 101 remained safely backed up, for legal purposes. Each one was a paper trail of trust, representing a financial commitment made in good faith to people who had ultimately broken that faith. Given the lack of a signed agreement, Elena laid out my options. "We have 2 routes," she explained. "We can pursue full repayment of your investment, with interest, which would likely force the sale of the restaurant. Or we can negotiate a structured settlement that allows them to continue operating while still protecting your rights. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to destroy my parents' livelihood. Draft terms that are firm, not punitive, I instructed. I want what's fair, not revenge. While Elena prepared the legal paperwork, the fallout from my withdrawal hit almost immediately. Though I had blocked their direct numbers, my phone lit up with voicemails and texts from unknown senders, friends' phones, even the restaurant line. The credit card processor is down, Dad reported in one message. They said you were the account guarantor and removed your authorization. The photographer canceled our menu shoot, Mom lamented. She said her contract was with you personally. Jace's messages swung between anger and desperation. So, you're punishing us because your feelings got hurt? Real mature, Skylar. And later, the reservation system's down. Bookings are disappearing. This is people's livelihoods you're playing with. His words gave me pause. I hadn't considered the broader impact, how staff, servers, and suppliers might be affected. That wasn't acceptable. I issued a one-time payment to restore critical systems and sent a note with it. This temporary restoration is for the benefit of your employees only. Permanent solutions are your responsibility going forward. On the third day after the text, an email from Brielle arrived. I hope you're satisfied with yourself. One childish outburst over not being invited to dinner has thrown everything into chaos. Jace is devastated. Your parents are blaming me, exactly what you wanted. If you cared about your family, you'd stop this financial hostage game and start behaving like an adult. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who had spent months undermining me, only to now claim victimhood. By Friday, Elena delivered the final settlement proposal. I would relinquish my ownership stake in Weston's in exchange for a structured repayment of $280,000 over 5 years, significantly less than my original investment, but enough to establish consequences while allowing the business to survive. This is generous, Skylar, Elena remarked. You're entitled to pursue the full amount. I know, I said, but this was never about the money. We couriered the documents to the restaurant that Monday. I included a short, personal note. This represents a clean break and a fair resolution. The reduced settlement amount is the last gift I'll offer. Their response came quickly and chaotically. My father bypassed the block on my phone and called my office directly. Skylar, you can't be serious, he pleaded. We can't meet these terms. The restaurant will go under. The settlement reflects less than what I actually put in, I answered calmly. The documentation is attached. You're welcome to propose alternatives. But we're family, he said, his voice beginning to break. Families don't do this to each other, I replied. Families also don't hold engagement parties and exclude their daughter because someone's girlfriend doesn't like her. Families don't erase 3 years of support without a second thought. You made your choices. This is me responding to them. A long silence followed. Then, quietly, your mother misses you. We all do. You miss me so much, I said. You hosted a celebration without me. Please don't insult my intelligence. 2 days later, their attorney contacted Elena with a counteroffer. $180,000 over 7 years, with the first payment deferred 6 months. Elena recommended rejecting the offer. But I accepted, with one condition: mandatory financial counseling for the business. If they don't learn how to operate within their means, I explained, they'll be back in the same position before the year's out. The agreement was signed the following week. I didn't attend. I sent Elena in my place. She later told me my parents looked worn down, remorseful. Jace was pale and silent, resigned. Brielle didn't show up. Word of my departure spread quickly through the local restaurant scene. Chef Mateo Rivera, who'd become a friend, reached out. They're struggling, Skylar. Not just financially. Operationally. Everything's falling apart without you. The systems, the structure, it's all slipping. I wished him well, but kept my distance. His updates trickled in over the following weeks. The marketing consultant quit after a bounced payment. Liquor vendors froze their account. Weekend reservations were down 30%. Most painful of all, customers ask about you often, he said. but staff's been told to say you're focusing on new opportunities. Even as my family struggled in my absence, they continued erasing me from the narrative. 3 weeks after the settlement was finalized, I received an unexpected email from Jace. Brielle and I broke up. I know that doesn't change anything, but I thought you should know. I didn't reply immediately. I needed time. 2 days later, another message followed. She left when the money started running out. Said she didn't sign up for a failing business. You were right about her. I'm sorry I didn't see it. His apology was notable, but it addressed only his misjudgment of her, not his betrayal of me. That would take more than a few overdue admissions to repair. The first settlement check arrived on time, accompanied by a handwritten note from my mother. We miss you more than words can say. The restaurant means nothing without you in our lives. Please give us a chance to make this right. I filed the check and threw away the note. By the 3-month mark, the pattern was clear. Weston's was still standing, but barely. The restaurant had shifted from thriving to merely surviving. My parents and Jace continued to send messages filled with regret and requests for reconciliation. I kept my distance, redirecting my focus to my consulting firm, which flourished now that it had my full attention. But emotionally, the damage lingered. The weight of family estrangement didn't lift with financial detachment. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Naomi Bennett, to help untangle the grief and betrayal that shadowed my days. She helped me realize something I hadn't fully admitted to myself. Part of my motivation for investing in Weston's hadn't just been love. It had been the quiet hope that my place in the family would finally be secure. Belonging can't be bought, Dr. Bennett said gently. And anyone willing to exclude you because someone doesn't like you is never offering real acceptance to begin with. As I worked through my grief and anger, it became clear that pulling my money from the business had been necessary, but it wasn't enough. If I truly wanted emotional peace, I needed more than reconciliation on their terms. I needed resolution on my own. After careful reflection, I drafted a single email addressed to my parents and Jace. I'm not ready for personal contact, but I'm willing to meet with a family therapist present to talk through the past year and assess whether a future relationship is possible. This is not a promise of reconciliation, only an opportunity for honest dialogue. Their reply was swift and unanimous. Yes. Healing, I knew, wouldn't be instant or certain. But for the first time, a step forward was being taken, not out of obligation, guilt, or desperation, but because I had chosen to reclaim control over what kind of relationship I was willing to have with the people who had loved and hurt me most. The 101 deleted receipts remained gone from my personal files. I had learned some investments couldn't be recovered. But one thing had been purchased at full price, a lesson in the non-negotiable value of self-respect. True family doesn't require you to trade it in. Those first 3 months after the text were the hardest. Even after all they'd done, 34 years of shared history didn't dissolve quietly. I'd catch myself reaching for the phone to share good news. Then remember, they were no longer my first call. Sundays, once filled with laughter and meals, stretched out like aching reminders of absence. Empty hours I had no idea how to fill. Dr. Bennett helped me through the loss. You're grieving not only the family you had, she told me, but the family you believed you had. That illusion broke, and that hurts just as much. Those words hit me like a freight train. I had spent my life playing the role of the steady daughter, the fixer, the one who showed up. Without those identities, who was I? The answer came slowly. I joined a weekend hiking group that explored New England trails. I took cooking classes, not for work, not for Weston's, but for me. I rediscovered the joy of food that hadn't been filtered through obligation. I began mentoring young women entrepreneurs through a local business incubator, pouring my experience into helping them build dreams of their own. My consulting firm expanded. I hired 2 new consultants. We took on international clients. What once had been a way to support my family's ambitions now became the vehicle for fulfilling my own. From the rubble of estrangement, real friendships emerged. Tessa Nguyen, my college roommate, the one who'd warned me against investing in Weston's, never said, "I told you so." She just invited me to her family's holiday dinners, so I wouldn't spend them alone. Chef Mateo Rivera, now a friend as well as a former colleague, stayed in touch. He eventually left Weston's for a prestigious post at a top Boston restaurant. "It's not the same without you," he told me over coffee one day. "Your parents seem lost. Jace is overwhelmed. He never learned the systems you built." I felt no vindication in that. Only sadness for what could have been. The settlement checks arrived each month on time. They represented both an attempt at amends and a permanent shift in our relationship. Money now replaced trust. Contracts replaced connection. According to Mateo, the restaurant had scaled back, closing 2 days a week, eliminating lunch service. Jace had enrolled in management courses at the local community college. Education I'd once offered to provide myself. Then 3 months after the text, a different kind of message came. An email from my mother, not filled with pleas or vague regrets, but something new. I realize now that saying Brielle didn't like you wasn't just hurtful, it exposed our failure as parents. We chose a temporary relationship over a permanent one with you. There is no excuse for that. I'm ashamed. It was the first message that acknowledged the real betrayal. Not just regret, but accountability. I didn't respond right away. I took the message to my next therapy session. "Do you want a relationship with him?" Dr. Bennett asked simply. Not out of guilt. Not out of habit. "Do you want it?" That question stayed with me for days. Despite everything, my family was a part of me. The memories, both the joyful and the painful, were stitched into who I was. And yes, after all the hurt, the answer came. I wanted something different, something better. A new relationship if one could be built with honesty, boundaries, and respect. That clarity led to my message proposing a therapy-guided conversation. Their willingness to accept affirmed what I had hoped. They, too, recognized something had to change. Our first family therapy session was scheduled exactly 100 days after the text. I arrived early. I was nervous, but grounded. Dr. Bennett had helped me prepare for this moment. My parents and Jace walked in together. They looked different, older somehow. My father's shoulders were more stooped. My mother's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Jace avoided my eyes. Dr. Sean Holloway, the family therapist, began by setting the ground rules. No interruptions. No invalidating emotions. Absolute honesty. "This isn't about blame," he said. "It's about truth." She explained that this process wasn't about assigning blame, but about understanding each person's experience and determining whether a path forward was even possible. I spoke first. My voice remained steady, though the emotion beneath it pressed hard against each word. I described the slow erosion of my role in the family after Brielle arrived, a gradual exclusion that ended with a devastating text message. What hurt most wasn't just being uninvited to a major family event, I said. It was the reason given. That someone who had known me for 8 months didn't like me, and that was somehow enough to push me out of my own family. My mother wept openly. Dad stared down at his hands. Jace's face flushed with shame. "I invested in Weston's because I believed in you," I continued. "Not just with money, but with time, expertise, and heart. I poured myself into building something that was supposed to be ours. Finding out that I wasn't considered essential to the family that business was built for, that shattered everything." When I finished, silence followed like a closing curtain. Then Dad spoke, voice heavy with remorse. "There's no excuse," he said quietly. "We got caught up in Jace's excitement. After watching him struggle for so long, we didn't want to disappoint him. We convinced ourselves that one dinner wouldn't matter enough to risk conflict. But we were terribly, unforgivably wrong." Mom added through tears, "When Brielle said she felt judged by you, we should have recognized it as manipulation. Instead, we let it divide us. And when you reacted as anyone would, it only confirmed the picture she'd painted of you. That was our failure." Jace finally met my eyes. "I wanted to believe Brielle loved me," he said softly. "But she loved the idea of owning a restaurant, not building one. As soon as the money problem started, she began talking about cutting our losses. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Their apologies felt sincere, but I didn't rush to forgive. "I appreciate you acknowledging what happened," I said evenly. "But trust isn't rebuilt through apologies alone. It requires change." Over the following months, we committed to weekly family therapy sessions. Painful truths surfaced. Jace confessed his long-standing resentment of my success. My father admitted discomfort with how much financial authority I held in the family. My mother revealed a fear that my independence meant I might someday leave them behind. None of these things justified their actions, but naming them gave me context, an understanding of the vulnerabilities that Brielle had so skillfully exploited. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding, but it was on new terms. I set firm boundaries. I would offer occasional business advice, but I would never again be financially involved in Weston's. My parents accepted this without pushback, finally recognizing that the wounds were still too raw for deeper entanglement. 6 months after our first therapy session, I returned to Sunday dinner, not at the restaurant, but at my parents' home. Weston still felt emotionally charged, a space tangled in pain. The dinner was awkward at times, with silence creeping in around sensitive topics. But there were also flickers of ease, laughter over shared stories, quiet hope that maybe something better could grow from the wreckage. Weston's, meanwhile, had stabilized under a simpler model. The settlement payments arrived like clockwork, reminders of both financial obligation and emotional debt. Jace eventually left the restaurant entirely, accepting a role with a regional restaurant group, an opportunity to actually learn the business, without the crutch of family ownership. A full year after the text, I returned to Weston's. The space had changed. It was smaller, quieter, stripped of the grand ambitions we once held. My mother greeted me with tears, but honored my request for a regular table, not the family spotlight. As I sat down and tasted the lasagna, my grandmother's recipe still on the menu, I reflected on everything that had brought me to this moment. The $330,000 I'd invested hadn't bought me a restaurant. It had bought me a truth I could no longer ignore. Self-respect is not up for negotiation. And real family doesn't ask you to sacrifice it. The 101 receipts I had once deleted were no longer needed to validate what I had given or what had been taken. The lesson was now etched into who I had become. I was stronger, clearer about boundaries, no longer mistaking sacrifice for love. The relationship I now had with my family would never be what it once was. That innocent belief in unconditional belonging was gone. But in its place was something else, something honest. A connection forged between people who had hurt each other, learned from it, and chosen to build something new from the ashes. As I finished my meal, my father approached. "Good to have you here, Skylar," he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time since our rupture. "Good to be here," I replied and meant it. Some betrayals can never be undone. Some investments never pay out as you expect. But healing, I had learned, doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require full restoration. It requires honesty, accountability, and the courage to begin again when the old structures fall apart. In the end, the most valuable lesson wasn't about business or even family. It was about self-worth. Knowing that I deserve to be valued not for what I give, but simply for who I am. That understanding, hard-earned and costly, was worth every penny of the $330,000 and every one of the 101 deleted receipts.